Let's be honest, most pattern tutorials are so boring and hard to follow. So in this video I'm going to be showing you a very quick, easy way to make a skirt pattern from scratch using your own body measurements. So the first measurement you want to take is your waist measurement, and that is typically at or just above your navel. Then you want to take your hip measurement, and that is the widest part of your hip area. As you can see, you want to make sure that your tape measure is parallel to the floor. Then we want to take our waist to hip measurement, which is typically 8 to 8.5 inches. And the last measurement you want to take is your nip to nip measurement, and that is going to be for our darts. So I've taken my pattern paper, I've cut out more than I think I'm actually going to need, and I've folded it in half. So to start, I'm marking down about 1 inch from the top, and that is going to be our starting point. So I'm just marking a line all the way across, and then I'm going to measure from that starting point, which would be my waist, down to my hip measurement. So that for me is 8.5 inches. So I'm just marking that at different points, and then I'm going to take my ruler and connect those dots, and that's just going to make sure that we have a straight line for these horizontal lines that we're drawing. So then I'm going to go back in from that starting point to the waist, and I'm just marking down to the length that I want my skirt to be. So that for me is 29 inches, and again I'm going to do that at different points of the pattern paper to make sure that we have a straight line. So I'm just marking a W for my waist and a H for my hip measurement, and then I'm going to go back into my waist measurement, and this time I'm going to take my waist circumference and I'm dividing that by 4, and that is a measurement that I'm going to mark down here. So as you can see, I marked down 7, and that means my waist circumference is 7 times 4, which is 28. Then I'm going to move down to my hip line, and I'm taking my hip circumference, which for me is 40 divided by 4, which gives me 10. So I'm just going to mark 10 there. Now I'm just going to grab my French curve, as you can see, and I'm going to make sure that I kind of connect those dots. Using your French curve helps you get kind of like a natural curve versus doing it with a straight line. But if you don't have a French curve, you can draw that curved line by hand instead. I'm going to add darts to this, which you'll only really need if you are sewing a non-stretch skirt. So I'm just marking my nipple to nipple measurement, and I'm going to divide that by half and mark that from our waist point. Then I'm going to add ½ an inch to both sides, as you can see, and I'm going to take that midpoint that we've marked and mark down by 4 inches. So I'm just doing a dot there, and then I'm just going to connect all of the dots so it forms kind of like a very angled triangle. Then I'm going to take my ruler again, and I'm going from my hip point all the way down to the bottom of the skirt. I'm curving in a bit because we want the hip point to be the widest part of our skirt. So as you can see, I'm just kind of tailoring or angling it so that it narrows down as I'm going down. So from our waist point, I'm going to just draw a straight line, and that is not going to be our seam lines, but I'll show you what we're going to do with that in a bit later on. So for the bottom of our pattern, I'm just going to again mark ½ an inch down for a seam allowance. So I've not added seam allowance to this. I started and then I got a bit lazy. So if you do want to add seam allowance to the skirt itself, you can do that now, or you can add seam allowance when you are cutting out the skirt on your fabric itself. So to make the skirt a bit better, I'm just going to curve the waist, as you can see. So I'm just marking from that ½ an inch line that we kind of left, and I'm using my French curve to create a natural curve, and I'm just marking and connecting the top, so that ½ inch seam allowance point to the top of our waist line. Then I'm just going to take my scissors and cut away the excess, and then we have our front pattern. So what I'm going to do is open it up, as you can see, and I'm going to cut down the middle, and then I'm going to take that second piece that we've not drawn lines on yet, and that is going to form our back piece. So there's a few adjustments that we want to make to this as well. The first thing we want to do is transfer all our lines, so that is our hip line, as you can see. So I'm just extending the hip line onto the back piece, and I'm going to do the same for the hem at the bottom and the same for the waist at the top. Then we're going to go ahead and add our dart again, so that is our nip to nip measurement divided by 2, so for me that's 4, so I'm marking that down on my waist, and then I'm adding half an inch seam allowance to both, to both sides of that. And instead of marking down 4 inches like we did for the front section, we're going to mark down 5 inches for this, and then again we're going to use our ruler or a French curve to connect those dots so it forms a very angled triangle. Then you just want to label your front piece and your back piece so you know which side is which. I'm taking my scissors and I'm going to cut all the way up that crease in the middle. And here you have it, guys. This is a front and back piece for a midi skirt. Granted, if you are cutting this out on non-stretch fabric, you want to make sure that you are adding your seam allowance at least 1 inch. But yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Let me know how you found it, and if beginner friendly sewing tutorials is your vibe, then make sure you check out this video next.